Welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back with another paper gameplay for you all today, showcasing some of our favorite decks. First up is Logan on Tivash, Gloom Summoner. This mono black deck hopes to gain a ton of life, then use Tivash's ability to cast some big fat demons on his end step. He keeps a hand with a swamp, 2 snow-covered swamps, Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, Prismatic Lens, Skyclave Relic, and a Twilight Prophet. Next up is Ethan on Rionya, Fire Dancer. This deck plans to copy powerful creatures with Rionya's ability by chaining together a bunch of instants of sorceries and moving to combat. His starting hand has 2 mountains, Expedite, Tormenting Voice, Galvanic Relay, Imperial Recruiter, and Port Racer. Our third player today is Cody on Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. This deck floods the board with creatures and swings it for a ton of damage with his commander. He keeps a hand with the Plains, Castle Ardenvale, Myriad Landscape, Strixhaven Stadium, Eldrazi Monument, Smothering Tithe, and a Source to Plowshares. Last is Shelby on Rada, Heart of Keld. This is a Gruul lands deck, hoping to get a ton of lands into play and then Alpha Strike with Rada. He starts the game with the Forest, Rootbound Crag, Balaged Recovery, Blasphemous Act, Lightning Greaves, Guardian Project, and Xenagos God of Revels. We're about to hop right into it, but before that, go ahead and leave us a comment on who you hope will take home the win. While you're down there, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. We post gameplay videos every week and new episodes of our podcast every other week, so subscribe so you don't miss any of our new content. Links to the deck lists, our social media, and our new Discord server are in the description. Now, on to the gameplay.
Ethan will win the die roll, he plays a mountain, and then passes the turn to Cody. Cody will play his tapped Myriad Landscape as land for turn, and then pass the turn to Shelby. Shelby will flip into Balaged Sanctuary and play it as land for turn, then pass to Logan. Logan will play Snow Swamp into Wayfarer's Bauble, and then pass to Ethan. Ethan will play his Ancient Tomb as land for turn, and then cast his Imperial Recruiter, taking 2 damage to his Ancient Tomb. He declares that he's going to go find Solemn Simulacrum, and then passes to Cody while he's searching. Cody plays the Plains as land for turn, and then he'll just pass the turn to Shelby. Shelby will play his Forest, and then immediately cast his Lightning Greaves, then pass the turn to Logan. Logan will play Swamp as land for turn, and then cast his Prismatic Lens, then pass to Ethan. Ethan does exactly what you expect. Plays a mountain, taps for 4, and casts Solemn Simulacrum. He'll take 2 damage off of his Ancient Tomb, and then find a tapped mountain to the battlefield. He'll then move to combat and swing 1 at Logan, the life gain deck. After this, he'll pass the turn to Cody. Cody will play a Plains as land for turn, and considers casting his commander, but ultimately decides to drop Thalia, Heretic Cathar. He'll then pass the turn to Shelby. Shelby unfortunately has to play a sad tapped Rootbound Crag and pass the turn. Thalia is a cruel landlord. On Logan's turn, he'll play another Swamp as land for turn, taps for 3, and casts his Skyclave Relic. He then taps for 2 and cracks his Bauble for a tapped Snow Swamp, and then passes the turn to Ethan. Ethan will play a Mountain as land for turn, and then cast Expedite to give his Solemn Haste and draw a card. He'll then tap for 5 mana, taking 2 to his Ancient Tomb, and cast Rionya. He'll then move to combat and make 2 token copies of Solemn Simulacrum. When they enter, he grabs 2 basic mountains tapped to the battlefield. He'll then swing 1 more at Logan, and then 2 at Shelby. After this, the turn is passed to Cody. Cody will drop his Castle Ardenvale, and then decides to tap for 4 and drop his Smothering Tithe. The turn is then passed to Shelby, who doesn't pay for Smothering Tithe, then immediately casts his commander, Rada. He'll then equip her with the Lightning Greaves, but unfortunately she did enter tapped. He'll then play a mountain off the top of his library, and then just pass the turn to Logan. Logan does not pay for Smothering Tithe, then plays an Urborg as land for turn. He'll then tap for 4 mana and cast Cryptghast. It'll resolve, so he'll tap for 4 more and cast his Twilight Prophet. Unfortunately, he only has 9 permanents, so he has not ascended yet. But after this, the turn is passed to Ethan, and he will not pay for Smothering Tithe. He'll then tap for 1 and cast a Rite of Flame to make 2 red mana. He'll then use this red mana to cast a Tormenting Voice, discarding a mountain. He'll then draw 2 cards and not pay 4 for Smothering Tithe. He'll then drop a Wheel of Fortune and take 2 to his Ancient Tomb. Ethan could potentially go off if he gets to refill his hand with his commander out, so Cody decides to respond by sacrificing a treasure and casting Swords to Plowshares on Rionya. It'll resolve and Ethan will lose his commander, but gain 3 life. Everyone will discard their hands and draw 7 cards. Shelby and Logan can't pay for Smothering Tithe, and Ethan decides not to, so Cody will make 21 treasure tokens. And the only notable discarded card is a Past in Flames from Ethan. Ethan will still continue with his turn, so he plays a mountain as land for turn. He'll then tap for 2 and cast a Harmonic Prodigy, then thinks for a bit, but ultimately passes the turn to Cody. And Cody starts off by casting a Paladin class. He'll then play a Shefet Dunes as land for turn, and then sacrifice 3 treasures to cast a Skyclave Apparition. He'll think for a little bit, but ultimately decides to take Logan's Cryptghast. He'll then tap for 2 mana, taking 1 to his Shefet Dunes, and cast Stoneforge Mystic. When it enters the battlefield, he searches and finds Cauldron Complete to his hand. He'll then tap for 2 and sacrifice a treasure to cast his commander, Adeline. He'll then sacrifice 7 more treasures to cast the Cauldron Complete. He'll then sacrifice yet another 7 treasures to equip it to Adeline, giving her +5/+5, First Strike, Trample, Indestructible, and Haste. He'll then move to combat and swing Thalia at Ethan and Adeline at Shelby. When he attacks, he'll make 3 lads, attacking all of his opponents. Ethan will block one of the 1/1s with his Solemn and then take 3 from Thalia. Shelby will take 12 Commander from Adeline and then 1 from the 1/1, and then Logan will only take 1 damage from his 1/1. After this, Cody will pass the turn to Shelby, and Shelby will not pay for Smothering Tithe. He'll then pay 1 and cast a Gamble. He tutors a card to his hand and randomly discards. The card he has to discard is a Splendid Reclamation. After this, Shelby will tap for 2 mana and drop a Dockside Extortionist, which is probably the card he tutored for. Cody decides to not sacrifice any of his treasures in response to its ETB trigger, so Shelby will make 14 treasure tokens. He'll then tap for 3 mana and cast a Scoot Swarm, then play a Forest's Land for turn to make a 1/1 token. He then sacrifices 2 treasures and casts a Druid class, then admits he probably should have played that before playing a land. He'll then sacrifice 3 more treasure tokens to level up his Druid class to level 2. After this, he'll play a Mountain as his second land for turn. When he does, he'll gain a life and get another Scoot Swarm. The turn will then be passed to Logan, and he will pay for Smothering Tithe later in his turn. He'll then play a Swamp as land for turn, then tap for a mana and cast a Soul Ring. He'll then tap for 3 and cast a Pristine Talisman. After this, Logan will pay 5 mana and cast his commander, Tivash. When he does, he'll gain a life to his Pristine Talisman. He'll then move to his end step, pay a life, and make a 1/1 demon. The turn will then be passed to Ethan, who starts off by casting Strike it Rich to make a treasure token. Oh yeah, and he doesn't pay for Smothering Tithe. He'll then tap for 7 mana, taking 2 to his Ancient Tomb, and recast Rionya. He'll then move to combat, and thanks to his Harmonic Prodigy, Rionya will trigger twice. He'll have 1 target Solemn and 1 target his Recruiter. So he'll have 2 token copies of each of them. When those enter the battlefield, he'll find 2 basic mountains tapped to the battlefield, and then Dockside Extortionist and Stormkiln Artist to his hand. This is going to give the Spellslinger deck a lot of mana, so the table is very worried. Moving on, Ethan will cast the Dockside Extortionist. Cody will respond by sacrificing 3 treasures and casting it to Fairy's Protection, phasing out his entire board. Shelby will also respond by sacrificing all his treasures for 3 green and 4 red. The Dockside will resolve, and Ethan will get 6 treasure tokens. He'll then sacrifice 4 of them to cast a Stormkiln Artist. And this is where the storming off begins. He'll start off with a Warlord's Fury, Artist will trigger twice, and Ethan will draw a card. He then casts a Crash Through, doing essentially the same thing. He'll then repeat this process with an Overmaster. He'll then sack all 5 of his treasures to cast a Finale of Promise X's3. He chooses Expedite and Wheel of Fortune as his 2 copies. And when he casts all 3 of this, he'll net 6 treasures. Ethan chooses to have Wheel of Fortune resolve first, so everyone will discard their hand and draw 7 cards. Expedite will then resolve, and Ethan will draw another. Continuing on, Ethan will sacrifice 3 treasures to cast a Bergi, God of Storytelling. He'll then cast a Soul Ring and make a red when he does. He'll then tap the Soul Ring to cast an Arcane Signet, getting another red mana. He'll then use his Bergi mana, Arcane Signet, and 1 treasure to cast a Throes of Chaos, getting another Bergi mana and 2 more treasures. And it's at this point I'm just going to make sure you guys know, every time Ethan casts or copies an instant or sorcery, he'll make 2 treasure tokens, and anytime he casts a spell, he'll make a red mana with Bergi. So just know, from now on, I'm just going to say triggers instead of Ethan makes 2 treasure tokens and a Bergi mana to save some time for both you and me. Continuing on with the game, Ethan cascades into Seething Song. Triggers. He'll then use 4 of that mana and discard a mountain to retrace the throws. Triggers. The cascaded card is a Humble Defector, which he'll cast, netting only 1 Bergi mana this time. He'll then retrace the throws, triggers, and the cascaded card is a Magmatic Insight. Unfortunately, he can't cast it because he doesn't have a land to pitch to it, so it'll just go on the bottom of his library. Everybody gets really hopeful because they think Ethan has fizzled out, but he continues on his merry way and drops a Pyretic Ritual. Triggers. He'll then cast a Lava Dart targeting one of Shelby's Scoot Swarms, and his mana producers trigger again. The table is still hopeful that Ethan may fizzle out, but remember that Past in Flames? Ethan does. It's in his graveyard, and he flashes it back. Triggers! And just so you guys know, when Ethan casts a spell from his hand, he'll be putting it in a separate graveyard. This is so he can keep track of what does and doesn't have flashback. He'll then start recasting his 1 mana instants and sorceries, starting with Overmastery. Triggers. He'll then repeat this process with a Ryle. He'll then cast a Primal Amulet and get 1 mana from Bergi this time. He'll then flashback Crash Through and get his triggers again. The process will be repeated by recasting Warlord's Fury. He'll then recast his Tormenting Voice by discarding a mountain, triggers. He'll then drop a Ruby Medallion, only netting 1 mana from Burgi. Liking what he did with the Tormenting Voice, Ethan decides to repeat it by casting Thrill of Possibility, discarding another mountain. Triggers! Still not satisfied, Ethan will repeat the process by casting a Wild Guess. Triggers? And with this, Ethan finally finds a way to kill everybody but Cody. He'll drop a Gutter Snipe. And since it is a shaman, every time he casts an instant or sorcery, all of his opponents will take 4 damage. So let the pain begin. Ethan will start off by flashing back Pyretic Ritual. Triggers. He'll then recast Seething Song. Triggers. He'll then drop a Cathartic Reunion, dropping a Mountain and Double Vision to draw 3 cards. Triggers. He then flashes back Strike It Rich. Triggers. He then flashes back Rite of Flame. Triggers. And then casts a Wheel of Misfortune. Triggers. Logan and Cody both chose 0, Shelby chose 1, and Ethan chose 14, so Ethan will take 14 damage. And also, Ethan and Shelby will discard their hands and draw 7 cards. Continuing on, Ethan casts Jessica's Will, and Shelby has a response. Remember all that mana he floated earlier? Well, it's still in his mana pool because phases were never changed, so he attempts to Beast Within Ethan's Harmonic Prodigy. Ethan will respond by flashing back Lava Dart, targeting Logan's face. Triggers. With the Gutter Snipe triggers on the stack, it'll kill Shelby, and unfortunately Beast Within will fizzle. So Ethan will continue on with his turn. Jessica's Will and its triggers will resolve, but Logan forgets to take the Gutter Snipe damage. Ethan gets 7 mana and 3 exiled cards. He'll cast a Renegade Tactics from those 3 cards. Triggers. He'll then Throes of Chaos again by discarding a mountain. Triggers. The card he cascades into is Crimson Wisps. Triggers. And oh yeah, Logan is unfortunately dead now. Cody is the table's last hope. Ethan will then drop an Alhammer's Archive, Burgi trigger. He'll then cast a Battle Hymn from his Jessica's cards. Triggers. And when he counts 13 creatures, so he'll get 13 red mana. He'll then retrace Throws again. Triggers. He cascades into Runaway Steamkin, which only gets him a Burgi trigger. And I'm just going to let you guys know, he misses every single Steamkin trigger. He'll then flashback Finale of Promise, X's 3, targeting Cathartic Reunion and Crimson Wisps. Triggers. With Cathartic Reunion, he'll discard 2 mountains and then draw 6 thanks to Alhammer's Archive. And then the Crimson Wisps will draw him too, and of course he gets triggers for both of these spells too. He'll then drop a Faithless Looting to draw 4 and discard 2, triggers. And after this, Ethan will move to his end step, having to discard a bunch of cards, losing mana, and exiling his tokens. Did he fizzle out? Could he not find the line? Anyways, the turn is now Cody's, and he phases back in. But Ethan stops him on his upkeep. He'll pay a mana and Lightning Bolt Cody's face. Gutter Snipe triggers twice, and Ethan will hold priority. He'll cast Increasing Vengeance, getting 2 more Gutter Snipe triggers and copying his Lightning Bolt. He'll then flash it back to copy his Lightning Bolt 2 more times and get 2 more Gutter Snipe triggers. When all of that resolves, it's a total of 24 damage Cody takes on his upkeep. Ethan then just shows a Chaos Warp, a Desperate Ritual, a Faithless Salvaging, and a Valakut Awakening. Those are 4 instants. Ethan has more than enough mana to cast, and with Gutter Snipe, that'll kill Cody. So Cody will concede, and Ethan wins today. Well guys, what'd you think? That was really explosive. Sorry half that game was just 1 turn. I will say though, all the decks did get to show off a little bit, and had some pretty explosive turns each. One was just a lot longer, and a lot more explosive than the others. But hey, sometimes that's just what happens when the Spellslinger deck goes off. They get there when they get there. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below. We love hearing from you. While you're down there, be sure to check all of our links in the description. You can find deck lists, our Discord, and our social media pages down there too. As always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate each and every one of you, so you better go out and have a smooth day.